Okay. Welcome to today's critique where we're looking at Revolution 2020, which is a narrative exploring a young man's journey from a failed engineering aspirant in Varanasi to the founder of a corrupt private college. So, let's jump right into the feedback, specifically looking at the structure and flow of his transition into that corruption.
Right. So to start, the narrative pacing accelerates unnaturally during the transition from the protagonist's academic failure to his partnership with the corrupt MLA.
Oh, you mean how fast everything just sort of happens?
Yeah, exactly. The weakness here is that this pivot relies heavily on sudden unearned conveniences. I mean, bumping into an event manager named Sunil at the exact moment he needs a guide to the underworld.
Yeah, that was a bit much.
Right? And then the loan sharks appearing perfectly on cue at the cafe to apply pressure, and MLA Shukla instantly agreeing to fund a massive college for a teenager he literally just met. It just makes the plot feel incredibly contrived.
Well, I actually want to push back on that a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
Because I actually found the sheer speed of this section undeniably exhilarating. Like, I thought this suddenness might be an intentional commentary by the author on the chaotic, fundamentally unfair nature of local Indian politics.
Interesting.
Yeah, sometimes systemic corruption really is just a matter of being at the right cafe at the right time, isn't it? If the author is trying to show how easily someone can slip into this dark underbelly, doesn't a really fast-paced sequence of coincidences accomplish exactly that?
I mean, I completely agree that the thematic resonance is there. It is a chaotic world. But thematic resonance doesn't really excuse broken causality.
Fair point. Causality is key.
Exactly. In storytelling, causality is your engine. When events happen because of a protagonist's prior actions, the narrative drive feels earned. But here, the engine just stalls because the protagonist is entirely passive.
He's just letting things happen to him.
Yes, he isn't making choices. Choices are just happening to him. When you rely on extreme coincidences to advance the plot, you rob the character of their agency. The tragedy of a protagonist falling from grace, it only works if they actively choose to take the stairs down into the dark.
Oh, I like that metaphor.
Thanks. But right now, Gopal is just standing in an elevator, and somebody else is pushing the button for the basement.
That's a really great distinction. It's kind of the difference between a vending machine and a Rube Goldberg machine.
Oh, totally.
Right now, Gopal's narrative feels like a vending machine. He puts in a coin of basic desperation, and a multi-million rupee college just pops out instantly, fully formed.
Exactly, yes.
What we need is a Rube Goldberg machine, where his small, desperate, active choices knock over a series of escalating dominoes that finally lead him to the MLA.
That is the perfect way to look at it. So the suggestion here is that we need to anchor this transition in the protagonist's existing world by escalating his moral compromises gradually. We have to force him to earn his way into the criminal enterprise rather than just handing it to him by coincidence. We need to see him sweat for it.
So let's talk about how to actually build that Rube Goldberg machine in the text. Instead of Sunil just randomly introducing the MLA master plan out of nowhere, what if Gopal is the one who actively seeks out Shukla?
Oh, using his past?
Yeah, we already know his father had desperate struggles with disputed agricultural property. Gopal could use a lingering memory of those struggles or, old documents he finds while cleaning at his father's desk to realize there's a loophole.
Yes, that's a great concrete example. And we can take that even further by grounding it in the immediate threat. Like, let's look at the loan sharks.
Right. Right now, they just show up to yell at him.
Exactly. What if instead they force Gopal into a low-level local land scam just to pay off the immediate interest on his father's medical debts?
Oh, start him small?
Yeah, he forces him to get his hands dirty on a very small scale first. He has to actually experience the guilt and the adrenaline of scamming someone out of a few thousand rupees before he scales up to millions.
I love that. And it naturally bridges the gap to the bigger plot. If Gopal is the one doing the grunt work for the local thugs, he might be the one who notices how educational trust laws can be manipulated to hoard land.
Exactly. He connects the dots himself.
Yeah, he brings the brilliant idea to the MLA. This gives him absolute, undeniable agency in his own corruption. He ceases to be a lucky bystander and becomes the tragic architect of his own demise.
And that shift from passive to active is absolutely crucial for the reader's investment. If we watch him choose to cross that line, knowing full well what it cost his soul, we are completely locked in.
Which actually brings us perfectly to our next point.
Oh, shifting to tone and style?
Exactly. If Gopal won't let himself be an active participant in his external choices, but instead acts as a passive observer, we see that exact same passivity in how he processes his internal trauma.
He really does.
Yeah, which brings us to the tone of his internal monologue. Like, if he won't even let himself feel his own grief, it completely warps how he interacts with the world.
For sure. So, the protagonist's unrelenting sarcasm occasionally blunts the emotional resonance of the story's most tragic milestones.
You mean it takes the punch out of the sad moments?
Yeah, precisely. The weakness is that because Gopal immediately pivots to witty, cynical observations or romantic jealousy right after monumental events, like discovering his father dead or failing the AEEE a second time, the narrative doesn't allow the reader to fully absorb the gravity of his loss.
It just moves right past it.
Right. The tragedy feels glossed over in favor of a quick punchline or a defensive deflection, and that prevents the audience from fully empathizing with his underlying agony.
Now again, I want to defend Gopal here. Or, well, rather, the author's psychological framing of Gopal.
Okay, let's hear it.
He just failed his exams for the second time. His father just passed away. He feels like a monumental failure in a society that prizes academic and financial success above absolutely everything else.
Yeah, the pressure is insane.
Instant cynicism, the most accurate, realistic defense mechanism for a young man in this situation. Like, he's shielding himself because if he actually processes the reality of his failure and loss, it would just destroy him completely.
You're entirely correct on the psychology. It is a highly accurate, very common defense mechanism. But we have to separate psychological realism from narrative effectiveness.
Okay, how so?
Well, think of it like watching a comedian who uses stand-up routines to hide their childhood trauma.
Sure.
It's an incredibly effective psychological shield for the comedian. But if the audience never gets a glimpse of what's behind the shield, if they only ever hear the jokes, they eventually stop caring when the shield gets hit. We have to remember the fundamental difference between a character's intellectual response and their visceral response.
Oh, that's a vital distinction. Sarcasm is an intellectual exercise.
Exactly.
It inherently requires distance. You have to step back from a situation to make a witty observation about it. Grief, on the other hand, is a purely visceral, physical experience. It lives in the body.
Yes, beautifully put.
When Gopal intellectualizes his pain the very second it happens, he forces the reader up into their head rather than down into their heart.
Precisely. As readers, we can only feel what the text allows us to feel. So the suggestion here is that the author needs to allow the narrative to breathe during traumatic moments by temporarily stripping away the protagonist's cynical armor to reveal raw, unvarnished vulnerability before he rebuilds his defensive walls.
You just have to pace the emotion.
Exactly.
So let's talk about the mechanics of how to do that, because it really comes down to sensory details.
It really does.
When a character delivers a sarcastic quip, the reader processes it as a joke. It engages the brain. But when you describe sensory inputs, like sounds, smells, physical textures, you activate the reader's sensory memory. You force them to inhabit the body of the protagonist before their brain can deflect the pain.
So let's look at some concrete examples and apply that to the moment his father, Baba, dies.
Okay.
Right now, the narrative immediately shifts to the logistics of the cremation. Gopal starts making dry, cynical observations about the touts and the death industry at Manakarnika Ghat.
Which is just too fast.
Right. We need to pause before we get there. Extend the moment of silence in the narrative. Ground the reader in sensory details that convey profound absence.
Like describe the physical emptiness of the house, the untouched strip of medicine sitting on the nightstand.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, or the lingering smell of his father's morning tea still hanging in the kitchen air. The absolute deafening silence of a home that used to hold 2 heartbeats and now only holds 1. We need to see the terrified, heartbroken boy who just lost his only parent before we see the hardened cynic analyzing cremation costs.
Wow, yeah. And that exact same sensory technique should be applied to his academic failures. I mean, the stakes in quota are life and death for these students.
Absolutely.
So when he fails the AAIE, the author should cut the internal monologue entirely for a full paragraph. Strip away the words. use pure sensory details of the room to convey his absolute paralyzing shock.
Oh, I see. Like the hum of the PC fan spinning in the background, the harsh artificial glare of the flickering monitor reflecting off his eyes,
Yes, perfect.
the suffocating, inescapable heat of the katana summer pressing against the window. Show us the physical paralysis of failure, rather than having him instantly rationalize his score or deflect it with a bitter joke about the education system.
That is exactly how you pace emotion. You give the reader the space to feel the gut punch. And the best part is, when you do that, it actually makes his ensuing cynicism feel so much more tragic and compelling.
Because we know what he's hiding.
Exactly, because then we, the readers, know exactly how much devastating pain he is desperately trying to cover up with those jokes. It changes the sarcasm from a narrative flaw into a heartbreaking character trait.
And this habit of keeping everything at an intellectual, sarcastic distance, it doesn't just ruin his grieving process. It fundamentally limits his relationships.
Oh, definitely.
Which brings us to our third area of critique, focusing on core essence and engagement, specifically regarding Artie.
Right.
He's treating the central love interest the exact same way he treats his trauma, as something to obsess over intellectually from a distance rather than engage with honestly as a living, breathing force.
Yes. So the characterization of the primary love interest relies heavily on the confusing muse trope, which strips her of agency and makes the romantic tension feel repetitive.
Yeah, she just kind of feels like a puzzle he's trying to solve.
That's exactly the weakness. Artie's motivations are frequently obscured solely to manufacture angst for the protagonists. Because we only see her through Gopal's obsessed, highly unreliable perspective, her actions feel frustratingly arbitrary.
Like when she goes to Kanpur?
Yeah. She drifts between Gopal and his idealistic friend, Raghav. She keeps Gopal guessing on internet chats. She goes to Kanpur with Raghav, and then she shows up unexpectedly at the college launch. They feel like manipulative plot devices rather than organic character choices driven by her own desires.
Now, I understand why the author went this route, though. I mean, the suspense of a love triangle, whether the female lead will choose the corrupt but fiercely ambitious protagonist, or the morally pure, but perhaps naive best friend. That's a classic trope.
It is very common.
Right, it generates a massive amount of suspense. It keeps the reader turning the pages to see who wins her in the end. Isn't this just an effective way to maintain narrative tension?
Well, it creates a very superficial layer of tension, yes, but it stalls the deeper narrative momentum.
How so?
A compelling story is fundamentally a collision of active character desires. If one character only exists to be desired, they aren't generating narrative momentum. They're just a finish line. And finish lines don't make choices.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right, because her internal life is entirely hidden from the reader. Her actions feel like they're just designed by the author to torture Gopal.
That's a fantastic point. The text makes a really strong case for Gopal's obsession. I mean, we are constantly inside his head, listening to him strategize about how to win her over. But it leaves a massive blind spot regarding who Artie actually is, outside of his perception of her.
Exactly. She becomes an object.
Yeah, an object to be acquired, rather than a person to be partnered with. If she is the ultimate prize that drives his descent into corruption, she needs to feel like a real person worth destroying your soul for.
So our suggestion here is to reveal fragments of the love interest's internal conflicts and grant her tangible ambitions or flaws that intersect with the main plot. We have to make her an active co-driver of the narrative.
Let's explore some concrete examples of how to actually do that, maybe starting with her career ambitions.
Good idea.
The material hints at her confusion between pursuing a glamorous career in aviation or a more grounded path in psychology. We can use that internal career conflict to mirror her romantic conflict.
Oh, that's really smart.
Like, let's reframe her attraction to Raghav, not just as arbitrary romantic confusion, but as a deep psychological craving for his clarity.
That is a brilliant angle. I mean, Raghav possesses the moral certainty and rigid idealism that Artie completely lacks in her own life. She isn't just attracted to him, she's using him as an anchor.
Right.
And conversely, she is drawn to Gopal because he represents the messy, unconditional, non-judgmental comfort she can't find in Raghav's rigid world.
That gives her so much depth.
Right? If the author establishes this, suddenly she isn't just a confusing muse toying with two men. She is a deeply conflicted young woman trying to figure out her own identity through the men she dates. That is a highly relatable active character arc.
And we absolutely must integrate that active agency into the main plot of the corrupt college. Like right now, when Gopal suddenly gets funding and builds this massive empire, Artie just acts mildly impressed.
Yeah, she just makes jokes.
Right, she makes a few witty comments about his new big man status. She feels completely detached from the moral weight of what he's actually doing.
So she has to challenge him. When Gopal acquires this sudden, unexplainable wealth, have Artie actively question the ethics of it, force a genuine confrontation of values between them.
Yeah, she isn't stupid.
Or perhaps she accidentally overhears a conversation with the loan sharks we mentioned earlier.
And if she confronts him on his ethics, she becomes an active participant in his moral descent. She holds up a mirror to his corruption.
Yes.
This forces Gopal into a corner where he has to actively lie to his face or attempt to justify his corruption to the one person he wants to impress most. That raises the dramatic stakes infinitely higher than just wondering if she's going to reply to his late-night chat messages.
It gives her real agency, and it gives their relationship profound, story-altering consequences. It changes the dynamic from a boy obsessing over a girl to two deeply flawed people colliding over their divergent moral paths.
That perfectly bridges all the structural and emotional layers we've discussed today. So, to recap the feedback from today's critique.
Go for it.
First, fix the engine of causality. Ground the transition into the corrupt college plot by escalating the protagonist's moral compromises gradually. Turn the vending machine into a Rube Goldberg machine by forcing him to actively earn his corruption through small scams.
Right.
Second, let the emotional moments breathe by temporarily dropping the protagonist's cynical armor during major tragedies. Use stark sensory details to allow the reader to feel the visceral physical pain before the intellectual sarcasm takes over.
Yep, pace that emotion.
And finally, dismantle the confusing muse trope. Give the love interest active agency. Tie her romantic choices to her clear internal conflicts, and have her directly challenge the protagonist's moral descent so she drives the plot alongside him.
I really believe these adjustments will deepen the narrative's realism, tighten the structural causality, and just massively amplify the emotional impact across the entire manuscript.
We highly encourage the author to apply these actionable suggestions and submit the revised material back to us for further critique. Because, writing a narrative is a lot like jumping out of an airplane.
Oh, here we go.
When a skydiver jumps, gravity inevitably does the work of pulling them down. But it's the parachute's deliberate, carefully constructed resistance that makes the descent survivable and fascinating to watch.
I like that.
Without that structural friction, without causality, emotional pacing, and character agency, it isn't a controlled, thrilling dive. It is just a fatal, instantaneous crash. A great story relies on that friction to ensure the landing is nothing short of spectacular.